All right, so part of what we're going to talk about has to do with writing a common assessment for planning and peer review. This is going to be a key piece in making sure that the tests that you write, that you're going to input into CMS, is quality tests, all right? And you'll see what I mean by that as we go along, but we're going to take a lot of different things into consideration. We're going to consider things like, is there a release star test question that goes along with it? Do we have example questions from previous tests? Have we tried to use ExamView? I know that this is mainly centered around science, but if there's a chance that there's an ExamView test question that's of quality, or perhaps it has an image that's of quality, then we might use that also. There's Region 4 warm-ups for science that we've used in the past. So there's just a lot of stuff out there that we want to make sure that we're utilizing to write a common assessment. So this is going to be uploaded onto the website under teacher links, but what I don't expect you to do is to go through this right now, but I'm going to hit a few kind of important things. The first thing is, whatever test you're giving, make sure you know the TEKs that you're trying to target. I would recommend in science, I know we usually don't target more than 2 to 3 per test. Some people automatically say, oh man, that's going to end up with 14 tests in a school year. Well, that's okay. If you're efficient at writing tests that isolate students who don't know what's going on, then it's okay to have that many tests, because it can help you have targeted tutorial sessions, teach, reteach. All of this stuff is going to come out in the end when you start to look at it. Starts with the common assessment. As really part of the entire PLC process is making sure you have the common assessment, which gives you reliable data year after year, which helps people understand better how to teach those misconceptions and those struggles a little bit better. So just to hit some of the quick things, things that you want to know is, what are the TEKs that you're attempting to target with this? There's things that you can do to find example questions. You can use Lead Forward, which I highly recommend that you become very, very comfortable with. It tells you supporting TEKs, readiness TEKs. It also gives you some other information when it talks about how to dual code for process TEKs. This is, again, related specifically to science, but I'm sure it overlaps into other curriculum as well. Open ExamView if you have access to that, and generate tests based on TEK, and then just use that. Save it somewhere. I went back and separated all of the 6th grade TEKs out of ExamView, and I opened those up and took a look at those test questions to see how useful they were. Use other resources that you might have available, such as the Region 4 warm-up book, anything that you feel might be helpful with isolating learning targets. And something that's also important is make sure that your test questions are measurable year after year for quality data. So the next thing is, pull out your KUD, man. That's a big part of this whole thing, and making sure you look at the essential questions. At the same time, number off the student should know section of the KUD. I take a picture of mine and then I just crop it down, so that's the only thing you can see. I'm going to show you. I always put it in the back of the test when I make it into Word doc format. So here's the KUD section for our particular TEK when it comes to density. So this is specific to density, which is 6.6b. We know that it's a supporting standard, so they're going to see it again in 8th grade. And all I did was just label off 1 through 9 of all of the density TEKs. The density students should know that have to do with that specific TEK. So we're going to make sure that our test has each one of those in there in some fashion. Okay. So we're going to go jump back real quick. When you have all of that stuff, ExamView, Lead Forward, other resources, your KUD, the students should know, you should be able to write a really quality test. Now, things that you want to consider, are there images that go with those questions? If so, are they charts, graphs, tables, infographics? You need to make sure you know those things, because it also is going to help with your dual coding piece. What level is the depth of knowledge for those resources? And again, we always make sure that we add this in 6th grade science. It's in the back of the test, and when we write it, we turn around and we use that one. Now, there's a whole bunch of these online that people can use. Bottom line is, are you making sure you're using these verbs in your sentence structure of your test questions, so you can immediately tag it to a depth of knowledge of a 2 or a 1 or a 3. We know we want to have variation in our tests, but having this right here handy as a reference is very helpful. The next thing is, are these multi-step questions, or are they single step or recall questions? Again, that'll help with your DOK. Other things that you want to really make sure that you're trying to remember, it sounds as simple, but just know if these are supporting TEKs or if they're readiness TEKs. If you have a supporting TEK in 8th grade, for instance, in 6th grade science, there's 9 of them out of the 30 that we're responsible for. Well, by the time they get to 8th grade, if you're looking for some of the TEKs that you're trying to make a test for, there may not be a released star question test for that, because they're not supported in 8th grade in that manner. So you can always rip from the 8th grade released star test questions and then kind of mirror those for your 6th grade test, but just know that the level of comprehension and understanding may be a little bit out of your target zone, but at least you have something to reference. Other things that you want to look at, did you hit all of the students should know from the KUD? And then we typically use a 10-question test. A lot of people are just floored that we use only 10 questions, but I can tell you if you use a quality 10-question test, you can see what students don't get it, and you can find the exact point to where they fall off, and then that can be used for a teach-reteach, or even if you're using data from last year, which I'm going to show you in this next test that we did have data from last year. I'm going to show you how to use that and what to do with it. One of the things that we try to do in 6th grade science is we save our test, we print it, and then we write all this stuff out on the test, and then each person gets a chance to go back and reflect on it before we upload it into CMS for our final edit. So I'm going to kind of go through this stuff again. This will be posted on my website under the teacher resource link. But so for instance, I want to just zoom out here a little bit. I'm going to look at test question number 1. And one of the things that I want you to see is all the stuff that is involved with this. These are my results from 2016. 66% chose question A, 24% chose question D. This gives us a real good idea of misconceptions. This is from last year's data. There are 2-star questions or 3-star questions for this TEAC. And again, what we do is we print those and we just put them in the back of the test so that way you can reference them. Here's the JMS success rate. This is the overall state success rate. So we just snip those down, make them nice and small so you basically can't read them, and then we put those on one sheet to save some paper. But you know where to get these things from. They're all come from Lead Forward, and so that can help you in writing. But if you jump back to question number 1, and I won't go into a whole lot of depth here, but for each question we isolate the STAR test that we think that it looks like, so the kind of the mirroring. Which questions from the KUD students should know does this attack? So number 3, number 4, 6, and 9. So if you look at those right there, 3, 4, 6, and 9. And then the DOK, so if you look at the word calculate is what we're going after here. And then it was dual coded with 6.4a. So we also print the process TEACs and put them at the very back. And that way it's just a quick reference so that way you can find everything. I've done this also basically for every test question for the last year and a half or so, and it really helps to open your eyes as to the value of each question. Don't trick yourself. This is very time consuming, but once you do this, you have a really quality test bed of test questions that hopefully increase DOK over time, and that helps you figure out where your students are struggling, what topics, you can pinpoint things. Can they not find volume? If you can't find volume, you're going to have a real hard time calculating density. So these are all things that I would consider looking at to make a quality test. And the next video is going to be how to put this test into CMS to make it useful for next year.